good. Oh, well, thanks. Oh, hi. You startled me. I'm Charles Robert Darwin. I was just packing to go on my trip to go to the Galapagos Islands. Due to a time anomaly, I'm able to live my life all over again, albeit the gray hair, which you get from time traveling, as well as facial hair. My ship, the HMS Beagle, doesn't leave for a few hours, so I have plenty of time to tell you about my life, in which I was a husband, a father, a correspondent, a letter writer, a prolific author. I wrote 15 books. I was a naturalist, a geologist, a botanist, an entomologist, a researcher, and I was a failed doctor and a failed clergyman and a controversial figure. So I was involved in a lot of things. I was born February 12th, 1809, into a rich family, in the wealthy family in Shrewsbury, England. I was fifth youngest of 6 children, and we all lived in a place called the Mount House, or the Mount. My grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, was a noted botanist, abolitionist, and freethinker, and my dad, Robert, was a prosperous physician. My mom, Susanna Wedgwood, was heiress to the Wedgwood Pottery Company. My mom, though, died when I was age 8, and I was raised by my 2 older sisters. And it's a little bit high. At age 8, be right with you in a minute here. At age 9, I went to Shrewsbury Middle Boarding School, about a mile from my house, with my brother Erasmus. And there at that school, I was a mediocre student, trained in the classical studies, but liked natural sciences and playing around with my dogs and hunting with them. And my dad told me, you're always hunting with your dogs and chasing rats, you won't be anything in your life at all. And then when I did that, my dad built a laboratory in the back of his house, and I was able to help him with his experiments later on. At age 25 and at age 16, in the year 1825, I went to University of Edinburgh to be a physician, just like my dad. But the medical courses there, they bored me. The dissecting courses, well, that disgusted me, and giving medical exams horrified me. So I changed my major in my college to Christ College in Cambridge in 1828. And there I wanted to become an Anglican minister. However, I did take a course in botany by John Henslow. And he was a very famous botanist, a world-renowned one. And I got very interested in plants and insects. And during college, I amassed a great beetle collection. No, not these kind of beetles, but these beetles here. Do you know there are over 350,000 kinds of beetles? And then I graduated from school in 1831, 10th in my class. I got a bachelor's degree. And in December of 1831, John Henslow recommended me for a position on the HMS Beagle, which was a ship that was to go around South America and then circumnavigate the world. It was a survey ship. And I thought that was really fun kind of a thing to do. And the captain, Robert Fitzroy, was in desperate need of intellectual companionship. Now, the Admiralty recommended me for this position, but my dad hemmed and hawed about it, and my uncle came in to help convince him for me to go. I was to pay my own way and go aboard as a gentleman naturalist, which means as a gentleman naturalist, I would collect, record, and preserve specimens, take copious notes, and I'll bring them back to England with me after the trip was over. And here's my position on the ship, where I would be in this room here. This was the Beagle. And this is my room here. It'd be 6 foot by 9, and with the mast embedded in it. Now the Beagle was important to go around South America because we needed important information about how, because trade relations were opening up the bays, inlets, and harbors of South America, as well as the southern part, or Patagonia, or Cape Horn. So we needed this information about it. Well, I boarded the ship in December of 1831. I took my belongings, my books on geology and botany, and as well as some weapons to protect myself. And the first stop was Cape Verde Islands, where we checked out the beach formations, and then on to South America. We would spend 3 years going around South America, and in total, 500 days at sea, a year and a half, and 1,200 days on land for the total trip. That was good because I'd often get seasick for days, so being on land was better. First stop was in the Amazon rainforest, where I collected specimens. And next stop, Rio de Janeiro, where I saw the slave trade, which is not a good thing to watch. And then down to Montevideo, Uruguay, the Falkland Islands. In Argentina, I collected fossils of animals that lived in the Pleistocene era, tens of thousands of years ago, like huge giant sloths that were 6 feet tall and huge elephants. And then on to Chile, where Captain Fitzroy named a mountain after me, and I experienced an earthquake. And then on to Peru, where we hiked up some mountains, and I found seashells at the top of mountains. Well, they were at the bottom of the sea, where the land had risen, all because of the earthquake type experience that I had experienced. So that's how that happened. And then we went on to the Galapagos Islands in our ship here, the Beagle. And the Galapagos Islands are 600 miles due west of Ecuador. And I was originally to go there to study the volcanic islands, a geologic wonder there. Actually, some of them were still smoldering craters there. But then there were many pockets of area that were forested. And during that time there, I fell in love with became enamored with the plants and animals there of those islands, and felt like a kid when I was there. My adventure of a lifetime with the Galapagos started in September of 1835, and I would dedicate 1/4 of all my notes to there, spending 5 weeks there, going to these islands in this order: San Cristobal, Florina, Isabella, and Santiago. And the first island, this would be pretty much what I would see all over. I would record what I saw, like giant tortoises, cactus, marine iguanas, finches, and mockingbirds. And that was the first island I saw. On the second island, I collected these, the beaks of these, I'm sorry, this is too high. It's throwing me off on this. I'm sorry, we need to adjust this.
I'm not very good at this.
Well,
I think it's all the way down.
Is that better? That's better. I think we got it.
Okay.
Thank you. These beaks of, thank you for doing that. I would collect more fishes on the second island. I went to Florina. And what I noticed about the different species of finches that I collected was they had different shaped beaks. And that got me fascinated. Actually, we would collect them, in nests, these specimens, and they have specialized beaks. These beaks help these birds adapt to their environment, survive, reproduce, and pass on their genes to the next generation. So the key here is in the beaks of these birds. And I noticed that some were meant for this, some were meant for grubs, a tool using finch, one for insects, and this kind. Each had a different beak. And these beaks make these animals, these species, very adaptive to their environments. This is called natural selection. And there are really 26 kinds of birds on the Galapagos Islands, and 16 of them are called Darwin finches, and 7 of them mainly eat insects, some mainly eat seeds, some cactus seeds and plants, some buds and fruits. Actually, these were highly evolving birds, as these volcanic islands took a long time to cool off and eventually had pocketed areas of forests in the area. And I also noticed when the tortoises that I found had different markings on them, so I knew what island they came from because of this variation. On the third island I went to, and marine iguanas that mainly eat algae. And on the fourth island, I went to Santiago. Well, my crew members helped me catch the animals that I wanted to, where I took copious notes. And this is where I developed my idea of natural selection based on how animals are adapted to and species are adapted to their environment. With natural selection, as individuals differ, and some of these differences can be passed off to their offspring. And the best ones, best suited to their environment, the best adapted, can be able to reproduce and survive. And fitness from surviving is inherent in an increase in organism chance of survival. And only the fittest pass on their traits, which leads to different variation in species. And I'm used to working with animals of all kinds because I used to eat them. I was involved in Cambridge in the Glutton Club at the University of Cambridge, where we would meet once a week and had parts of rodents, owls, hawks, things like that. So I was used not only collecting them, but eating them as well, as a side note. When I came back from this trip in 1836, in October, I had amassed a great volume of specimens. I had 5,400 specimens. I had skins, pelts. I had hundreds of carcasses, small ones preserved in salt. I had nests, feathers, shells, rocks, feathers, and I had amassed 760 pages. Thank you for doing that. That's been my problem. So it goes down. I don't understand
Your
why.
slides that are cut out.
Yeah, you zoomed in.
Zoom out. Zoom out on your computer.
I don't know how to do that.
Try it here.
I'm sorry. Well, I had all these specimens here, and I had. Is that better?
Nope.
I don't know what it is.
Oh, then it's my fault. I'm sorry for that. I had all these specimens, and I had enough specimens for years and years of research to do this. And I had the time to be able to do that because my dad gave me a 400-pound allowance. So I had my work cut out for me. And let me give you a bit of background on this to start this off. It was thought back at the time when I was living that God created the earth in 6 days, and that the earth was made about 6,000 years ago, and that Adam and Eve were the first people on earth, were created by God and put on the Garden of Eden. In all these illustrations, man is always white and always has perfectly coiffed hair. Everything was unmutable. Everything was in place, like this. It was right there. What was there? Well, like animals, like trees, birds, plants, insects, the air we breathe, the topographical features, everything was right there and done. And this was hammered home by the Bible, by priests, and by folklore. This was the mindset at the time. Luckily, though, I lived in the Enlightenment period, and some people had some unique ideas, like Jean Marc, who, through acquired characteristics, said that animals improve over time. That is, and this helps them, these acquired characteristics help them survive, reproduce, and pass on their genes to the next generation. Much like a giraffe. It had to stretch for food. This stretching was an improvement. It was passed on until now they have a 6-foot-long neck. Well, that was a great improvement, and any trait not utilized was not passed on. So it was a use and disuse theory. But it didn't explain genetic variation, but it was a good attempt. And Thomas Malthus came along during my time and said that population would outstrip food supply. Population grows at a geometric rate, 1, 2, 4, 16, 32, 64. Food production increases at an arithmetic rate, 1, 2, 3, 4. And he predicted a catastrophe for this. We didn't have 1 billion people on our planet at that time. Now we have 8 billion. We're able to feed the world because of GMOs and wonderful animal husbandry. But he predicted this catastrophe, and it just didn't happen. In Ukraine, back a year and a half ago, the grain shipments were stopped, and 350 million people became deprived of food and went into starvation mode because of that. So he was right. And actually, a protege of mine, Alfred Wallace, who I was his mentor, he had been around the world just like me. He thought of endemism, which means species are endemic to their biological biomes or ecological niches. This is why you only see tree frogs in the rainforest but not in the Arctic, and why you see birds like this in Australia but not in Tibet or Canada. So we have some variations here, but my theory is that individuals whose physical and behavioral characteristics are best adapted to their environment have a better chance of reproducing and passing their DNA forward. And we found this by a subtle way called natural selection that nature does. And it's very subtle, granted. And I found also about this with my theories by working with pigeon breeders. And that iridescent feathers on their neck, and that if people wanted to get more of those kind of iridescence and have bigger wingspans, they would make similar pigeons alike. We do the same thing with dogs. Now there are over 300 species of dogs. We do the same thing with sheep to get more wool out of them to make money. We suit animals up to their best characteristics. That's called artificial selection. Natural selection is when nature does it itself in this subtle way. And there's this joke I used to go around: why did the chicken cross the road? Because chickens over a great period of time have been naturally selected in such a way that they are now genetically dispositioned to cross roads. That used to be funny in my day. When I was 30 years old in 1839, I married my cousin Emma Wedgeworth. And actually, we had a short courtship, a short engagement, and I was, being a scientist, I wrote down the pros and cons of being married, and I thought that being married was far better than being with a dog. So, we had a short, simple Anglican ceremony. I was agnostic and Unitarian, and she was a bit more spiritual than me, but we would have a long, loving relationship lasting 43 years. And in that time, we would produce 10 children. And the first one, William Erasmus, was, of course, your firstborn is always a science experiment. So I documented his sneezing, coughing, and hiccuping in science journals and to be published. Every child wants that to happen to them. And my second-born, Anne Elizabeth, born in 1842, and I was really close to her growing up, but she died of tuberculosis at age 10 in 1852, and I swore I would never, ever become involved in religion again because of this. My third-born, Francis, became a botanist. George Howard became a distinguished geophysicist, was an expert on tides and knighted by the Queen. Elizabeth stayed in our house all her life and never married. Henrietta, well, sickly as a child, became her mother's biographer and helped me out with my notes later on in life and my writings. And Horace became the president of the Cambridge Instrument Company and was knighted by the Queen, and Leonard was a distinguished member of Parliament. And here are my children here. I want to show you their pictures. Here is Emma with our son, and here I am with my daughter. Here's our son, Francis. And actually, I watched them all grow up. I had the time to do this. I was a gentleman naturalist, and I had servants, so I decided to do that and took long walks in the morning, spent time being with my kids like this, and wrote during the other part of the day. And I would be very close to them because I like playing with them. I like playing their games. We played backgammon at night. I'd read with them. We had a wonderful relationship. They were so fun to watch growing up when I was with them. It was one of the best things in the world to watch my children to become grown-ups. And all this time, I was questioning about incest because 3 of my kids were infertile and 3 of them died early. So I had to question that because I studied the plants in my garden that I was playing around with this about inbred plants. Kids died early then, but I was forced to question this. And in a sarcastic way, I discovered the vitality of genetic variation in the species, but had 10 kids with my first cousin. So go figure, and that's because love is blind. We all lived together in a place called Down House, which is 15 miles south in the Kent countryside of, south of London, by the way, down that way. And you can take tours of it today, see our estate, and briefly, let me show you our living room, our parlor, our dining room, our bedroom, and the study that I did my work at. And this was the study where I would sit at my desk and watch this and do this. And I would be a list maker, I'd make lists. And I'd also write these essays in geology, botany, entomology, and geology. And I'd take these essays and I'd send them to colleagues who would know all about them. And they send them back to me with their corrections or their ideas about how I could do this better, and then I'd publish them. And also I'd take their essays and do the same thing, do the same way. And that's how us scientists collaborated back then, writing letters, sending essays, and then eventually having them published. That's how we got along back in the day. And this is my tree of life that I drew, that all species generally come from a common ancestor and then branch off. And we'll be getting into this specifically in a little bit. And I wrote books, like The Voyage of the Beagle. My diary, here's the Beagle without any masks on. And all this time I'd be in my study. And I'd be examining the species that I found, maybe like this bird. And I go back and forth to it and write my notes on it. As a matter of fact, I did this so much that I went back and forth so much that I put wheels on my chair and made the wheeled office chair, which is all you sat on when you were working. So that's how I got scooted around in my den. And I wrote other books, like on coral reefs. This is my book, Geological Observations of South America, and became an expert and wrote books on barnacles. You say barnacles, oh, how boring can you get? Well, barnacles affect the speed of ships. They have to be scraped off, and they also get on whales. And they're an invasive species sometimes. And all this time, I had a bizarre illness. After I came back from my adventures around the world, I had periods of vomiting, headaches, depression, queasiness, upset stomachs. I tried 20 different doctors. And some of them were quack remedies, like putting batteries around my stomach. All this didn't work out at all, until I found out maybe I was lactose intolerant, and that helped understand things. But all this time I've been working on my seminal book, Origin of Species. And I really didn't want to publish, because I kept going back and forth to my specimens, making sure all it was sound, irrefutable, with empirical scientific proof. I wanted no qualms about it at all. And I thought that my colleagues would consider it a myth about what I had to write, because it was a radical interpretation. They'd laugh at me, and I'd be ostracized by my community that I love so much in the science fields. So I didn't write it. I didn't publish it. And then in 1858, Alfred Wallace, shown here, why, he wrote an essay and wanted me to critique it, and it was the same thing that I was working on in natural selection. And so I wrote to him and said, we're working on the same idea. Let's publish it together at the Linnean Society. Not publish it, but let's have a joint paper together there. And he agreed on that, and my colleague said, well, you can do that with Wallace, but it's time for you to publish Darwin. It's time for you to pull the trigger. And I did with The Origin of Species in 1859. And it became a bestseller. It wasn't until the 5th edition that I mentioned the word evolution. It wasn't until the 6th edition that I said survival of the fittest, so it was a works in progress. And wouldn't you know, my former friend, my captain, Fitzroy, we've been friends for years. When this book came out, he went on a public tirade about this and was totally against it because he believed in the biblical interpretation, the creationist theory about this. He had married a magical woman, and he was hooked into that side. So I lost him as a friend. But the major takeaways of Origin of Species is that species change over time, and they take a long time to develop, maybe sometimes millions of years. and that they don't change by catastrophic events like floods, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, meteor strikes, but take a long time, and that species are closely related to each other and that they have a common ancestor for the most part, which we'll get into here. And the third part is the principle of uniformitarianism, the theory that geologic processes are the same today as they were in the past. 1 million years ago, there was sedimentation, erosion, and vulcanization. Right now, the same thing is going on now, uniformitarianism. And in 1871, I wrote a book, and this is the most controversial one, called The Descent of Man in Relation to Sex. Sorry, I couldn't read that. And in this book, I said that humans aren't really animals. We are part of the primate family, and that we are indirectly, and I'll say that word again, indirectly related to apes. Indirectly. And this caused quite a stir. And that the females, in most species, are the ones in control and decide who to mate with. They are in charge. Let's go over this. Well, us primates had a common ancestor about 15 million years ago that branched off to be orangutans, that branched off to be gorillas, that branched off to be chimpanzees, monkeys, and the other primates. And we, Homo sapien, came into being about 5 million years ago. And we are in the Homo species because we have 3 physical characteristics no other animal has. We walk bipedally or upright. Number 1. Number 2, our brain is 2% our body weight, or 3 pounds. No other animal has as highest encephalization quotient as we do for a weight and height. And then 3, our humerus, the bone that goes between the elbow to the shoulder, is 30% shorter than the femur, the bone that goes between the knee to the hip. Those are the 3 qualities, physical qualities, that make us human. And about sexual selection, the other part of the book, Descent of Man, well, that some traits might be detrimental to survival but provide an advantage. Well, everybody knows where a frog is when it croaks, but the female, the ones that have the loudest croak, the female is going to go to. A peacock has these silly, ostentatious feathers, but he gets the ones with the most flamboyant display, gets the female. Same with the antlers on a deer. And then a bird, the one that sings the loudest and that has the most complicated bird song, is the one that's going to get the female. And about the cardinal. Oh yeah, this is what I collected on my farm. The cardinal, you can see this 200 or 300 yards away. But he's telling the female, I got the stuff, baby, I got it. I'm robust, I'm healthy, and if you mate with me, your offspring are going to be the same, and they're going to be able to survive and reproduce and pass on their genes. In other words, the species is going to continue forward. And this is my proof because of my color. Same thing with the lion. It has this mane here that doesn't do any good on a hot savanna African area. But he's telling the female, I'm virile, I'm full of testosterone, you mate with me, you get pregnant immediately, and you will have fantastic kids that will be super healthy and robust. But my ideas, especially about primates, were convoluted, turned around, turned upside down, and it was thought that, gee, we are directly descended from apes, and that's not true. So my ideas got twisted. After all, we are the masters of the universe. We are the most intelligent species around, possible. We can do all these fantastic things. We can talk, communicate, we can write books, we can invent things, we can make fantastic cities. We are the best. But these primates here, well, they're really lowly. They work on instinct, they're filthy, they're disgusting, they don't communicate. Actually, they do. Jane Goodall says that they make 50 sign languages, but we won't count that. And we are on the evolutionary ladder to go up. Because of our intelligence, we are the best. But it's really not the strongest nor the most intelligent of the species that survives, but the one most adaptable to change. Heard you have nuclear weapons in your days. Now you can use them in conflicts at any time, by the way, in Ukraine or even in Israel. But you know who survived that blast? That's right, the lowly cockroach, the palmetto bug. It's been around 320 million years, and no one can possibly catch it, no matter how hard you try. So my ideas were a direct contradiction to the Holy Bible, a direct antithesis to it. Instead of things appearing like this, well, I said it takes time to do it. I said no catastrophes, no giant floods. This created quite a stir. Now, I did not know this woman. She lived in England the same time I did. Her name was Mary Anning. She was a fossil hunter. She was responsible for the phrase, she sells seashore. She sells cells by the seashore. You see how much I learned back in the day? And she found these great ichthyosaurs in the cliffs in England. And she knew that they were tens of millions of years old. She showed people this and said that why the lower the fossil is in the record, the older that they are. But no one would believe her. She had pastors come over and they said, they didn't believe her at all about what she found. All this time I had something called Chagas disease, or the kissing bug disease, that I got when I was in the South American area. This led to all kinds of my problems that I had, with stomach problems and even cardiomyopathy and irregular heartbeats. And this made me then have a heart attack in 1873 and 1882. I died in Down House. Emma was right next to me, my family was around me, and my last words were, I'm not the least afraid to die. I was buried in Westminster Abbey, not too far from Isaac Newton. Thousands came to my funeral. I was a national hero. Actually, this lecture should end, because I died, it's over with. But still today, my theories cause problems, and they are still around today. Let's find out how. My theory of evolution is just a theory. It's not fact. And over the years, 150 years, tens of millions of people have tried to discredit me and put me down. And I say, bring it on, because science is so wonderful that I think science should be a challenge, because all you people here are here for this reason, to find a better answer. So I say, okay, what do you got? You got a theory that's better than mine? So easy to use a sledgehammer and knock my theories down. What have you got instead to replace it? Do you have anything with something that's solid, robust? Do you have with empirical proof? Or do you have just a bunch of psychobabble, pseudoscience, and emotional strings attached to it, much like the conspiracy theorists do in the villages here, particularly with UFOs and aliens? What have you got? So bring it. And they don't. And if you don't have my ideas right now as a naturalist, you're not going anywhere. No one's going to publish you. No one's going to watch you. Maybe on a TV show. You'll be considered a flake, a fringe person on the outside of things, a phony, a fraud, a humbug. Actually, we're just a breed of advanced monkeys on a minor planet of a very average star, but we can understand the universe. We live on a very small planet with a very average sun, in a very average solar system, in a very average arm of a very average galaxy, in a very small quadrant of the universe. But we can understand it. And that there have been 22 species of Homo before us. You say 22? Yeah. First one, Australopithecus africanus, a person living in the African Rift Valley who was about 3.5 to 4 feet tall. They weighed 70 to 90 pounds. They had dark skin and curly hair, and we know they walked upright because we found their footprints embedded in volcanic ash. Homo habilis, found by Richard and Mary Leakey in the African Rift Valley in Tanzania. They were the first major ones to use tools, and they took it to another level using stone tools to be able to survive. Homo erectus, first to walk upright and more looking like us, and Neanderthal and Homo. 22 species. My ideas then cascaded like a fast-flowing river and rumbled and tumbled into conversations that you have with your spouse at the dinner table, that would be in sermons in churches, that would be in public lectures and debates. It would be in magazines, periodicals, newspapers, and even small talk. And all this came to fruition with 98 years ago in 1925 with the Scopes trial. John Scopes, a high school biology teacher, taught evolution to a state-funded Tennessee school, which was not legal at the time. On his side was Clarence Darrow, who represented the evolution side, the cool, logical, rational science side of it, and then the opposite side was William Jennings Bryan, who represented the creationist side, or the intelligent design side, or the biblical interpretation of what we talked about. And William Jennings Bryan, by the way, ran for president 3 times and was the nation's greatest orator at the time and super well respected. And the two of them went at it, and it became a movie, play, and a book called Inherit the Wind. And in this, Darrow cross-examines Bryan, who says, okay, Mr. Bryan, if you don't think evolution is right, then when was the world created? And Bryan said, I got an answer. It was Tuesday in June in the year 6,417 years ago at 9 o'clock in the morning. And the courtroom audience burst into laughter. Someone piped up and said, was that Eastern Standard Time or Central Time? and what Darrow did was expose the hypocrisy behind the creation side, because there's no solid, empirical, tangible proof behind any of it. It's just a bunch of hearsay from people who wrote a book about 1,800 years ago, although well-intentioned. Actually, Scopes lost the trial. Had to pay $100. Bryan would die 3 weeks later from public humiliation. Let's fast forward this today. Okay, so by chance or by design, theories of existence. 11 years ago, Gallup poll. 46% thinks that humans were created by God. Another 32% said that God guided them, and God had no part, just about 14%. So this is evolutionism versus creationism or intelligent design. The debate still rages today. So we have evolution of how animals crawled out of the swamp and eventually became the creatures we know today, or creationism, the symbol of the fish, where everything is created like that and done. Which is it? Why not just take this local? Why not find, look in your newspaper, 4 years ago, Dr. Carl Baum came here to Leesburg and said that since the Earth is just 6,000 years ago, dinosaurs and men must have lived together. So they could all fit on the ark, because he's founder of the Creation Evidence Museum. And over here, Tom DeRosa came out here and said, exposing the great myths of evolution. So this is creationism versus Darwinism, and Mr. DeRosa had this article, this printed in the paper, because our grandchildren and children have been indoctrinated in the fact of evolution. It's just a theory. So all this nuttiness, what does it apply today? Well, your newspaper has Faith in Action. It's been doing this for 3 months. Well, we get the idea, people putting their hands up in the air and being exalted. Well, what about Science in Action? We have all these wonderful people who give talks at these clubs like Freethinkers, Philosophy Club, Humanist Club. How about portraying some of these people instead of always churches? Just an idea. Well, why wait? You know what? I'll tell you something. Right now, there's a boy or a girl teenager being indoctrinated in a Christian home. They're going to a Christian school, and 40 years from now, they'll come out to here, like Mr. DeRosa, and they will give lectures here in small churches. And the debate will still go on. Well, why wait that long? Why not just go here to the Creation Museum in Petersburg, Kentucky, where they have, for $75, you can see a museum that costs $27 million and 75,000 square feet. And if 250,000 people a year see this, well, you can see 600-year-old Noah. You can see Adam and Eve, who are white and look like they popped out of an 80s disco. And you can see the Creation Museum there. And this is a full-scale replica of it, because this is evidence for creation, but the other side says this is evidence for evolution And the debate goes on. Or why not go to Pensacola 20 years ago and see Dinosaur Adventureland? Because men and dinosaurs lived at the same time. Unfortunately, this shut down because the owner of it had to go to federal prison for 12 years because God told him not to pay federal employee taxes.
That's true.
So, did humans
can't make
develop
that up.
from earlier species? Agreed. But disagreed. 51% disagreed. Did humans and dinosaurs live at the same time? Don't know, really? And 30% agreed. Even though they're separated by 65 million years, and mainly 120 years, and even more. But that evolution is a scientific theory based on observable evidences like fossils and is taught by scientists. We talked about the finch developing, we talked about humans, well, why not horses? Well, horses developed 30 million years ago with Eohippus, and slowly, over time, they became the modern day horse. So creation isn't even a theory, it's just based on an imagination of preachers and nomads that lived 18,000 or 2,000 years ago. Christina Camero was on this because she ran for Secretary of State in the state of Michigan 2 years ago as a conspiracy theorist. She did not believe that evolution should be taught in public schools. That's her business. She's now the GOP party chairwoman of the entire state of Michigan. The entire party chairman for the entire state of Georgia is Candace Taylor, who's a flat earther that says globes are part of a conspiracy. Is this what you have now? Alternative facts? That is, can we agree on anything? Or is everything an opinion and needs to be interpreted? When you have that, you have an intellectual civil war, which is what your society has made. In my day, a rectangle had 4 sides. In your day, it could have 3 or 5. It depends on the feelings of somebody else and their opinion. And their opinion. Well, okay, now you got it. Now how are you going to deal with it? So this is creation versus evolution. And in Cobb County, Georgia, 21 years ago, they put a sticker on high school biology books. And it said, this textbook contains material on evolution. Evolution is a theory, not a fact. It should be approached with an open mind. Really? Well, many of you read books and are really proud of the books you read. Like biographies, you read about different subjects, and you tell people about them, and you say, oh, how wonderful it is to read so-and-so. Can I recommend this book to you? How would you like it if I stuck a sticker on your book like that and said that? Well, if I did that, you'd tell me where to stick my sticker, wouldn't you? So that's really arrogant to do something like that to a high school biology book. So is biology God's living creation, or is it something that just happens and we don't know much about it and are floundering for answers sometimes? So this leads to a heart and mind dichotomy. The mind has all this terrific amount of evidence, but decides not to use it sometimes because the heart, our emotions, get in the way. This is called an intellectual dichotomy or cognitive dissonance, and is why we have the problems we do nowadays. Well, you know what? I'm going to let you debate about this and let you decide on what you think is right, because that's your business. So I just pointed out some things to you. I'll let you decide. Numerous things are made after me. Named after me, like the Charles Darwin University in Australia, with a beautiful campus. Oh, we have the city of Darwin, Port Darwin Football Club, Darwin Airport, Darwin Day in Iowa City. Numerous beetles and insects are named after me, a couple dozen actually, because of my beetle collection that I got interested in. And you can go to the Galapagos Islands yourself and see a research station named after me, my statue of me. Take a tour. You can go to Mount Darwin in Chile, see the mountain Fitzroy named after me. I have stamps, my likeness on them, commemorative coins, and real money. And then there's the Darwin Awards. People doing really stupid things and losing their lives because of it. Everybody wants to do these things, don't they? Just to make a point. Well, and here they are. This guy tries it and ends up being dead. A shark, really? So, did we really go forwards, backwards, or sideways? And here we are. Are we walking off a cliff or not? That's up to you to decide. And you can go see this Mad Max. He wanted to prove the Earth was flat, so he went up in his rocket to be sure, and the rocket ends up blowing up in space. Another example of the Darwin Awards. And there's social Darwinism, which means that the fittest, that is the most richest people, are the ones that should be exalted. They're the ones that should be lifted up high, like in my day, Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller. But in your day, they've been replaced by a guy named Bezos, a guy named Musk, and a guy named Zuckerberg, and they control 1/5 of the nation's economy. Should we exalt them or not? Are they the most fit to survive? You decide. On a more robust way to look at this is that following Darwin's footsteps, there was a ship, a schooner, that was made. It's going to go to the ports, the same thing I did. The Beagle went to. This is a real scale replication of the Beagle. It's going to go to 32 different ports. This was the ship I sailed on, and this is the one that took me to be able to find all these variations. If I would have stayed in England and stayed at home, I never would have been able to find out about this. But she's just gorgeous. And then, being a geology major, I made a rock band called the Rolling Pebbles, because it's evolution, baby. And here I am playing bass guitar. And we really cranked out the hits back in the day, let me tell you. The Rolling Pebbles start me up. I told you I told you, get off my cloud. I had sympathy for the devil, and I jumped around like Jack Flash. I wanted to be shattered sometimes, but like tumbling dice, you just gotta roll me. I'll never be your beast of burden. I told you to give me shelter, to paint it black, and I can't get no satisfaction. And you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you just might find, and the chorus says, la la la, you get what you need. So, here I am, Charles Darwin. I lived during this time, and I believe I help people think more clearly. And thank you very much. That is the end of it.